today here at the watch party on the watch list. Me. Hi, how you doing? I noticed that the chat is already moving. What Stephanie Sinclair? I'm right here. Stephanie Sinclair, I'm right here. You asked the question and I just pop up. I could bring up a wrestling reference, but I'm not on John's show right now, so we'll save all that nerdiness for another time. Mara Falson also says, "Look at us all on time and shit." Well, that makes you guys, and apparently not me. I'm like a minute behind, but there's a good reason for it. There's a very good reason for it. Um, when I come up with that good reason, I'll let you know probably next time that I'm late. But I mean, let's get the new year off started off right, right? Last year I was on time pretty consistently after I started this random stream, like on July 27th, I believe, or June. I'm sorry, it was June 27th. I started this whole thing going crazy. I believe, who knows? I can't remember these things. Every once in a while, I have to have a little bit of extra because I research way too much. I find way too many things that I'm probably never going to get to on this whole thing. But I do it for the people. I do it for the watchers, you crazy folks out there. Christina Elisa Brown, good to see you. Naomi Nay PB, let's do it. I agree. Let's go ahead and do it. Now, since you guys have already said it, since finally now Naomi's on board, I say let's go ahead and get started because I have way too much to talk about as usual. You probably saw some of the confrontations that was going on yesterday with some elected leader, some very important person in the United States of America. But did you guys see this particular moment from maybe a little less influential figure, but still a piece of garbage regardless? Check this out. It was Eric Adams at the airport.
Me in the face, Eric Adams. Please punch me in the face. I would love if you punch me in the face. Okay, you can get fucked too.
All right?
Yeah, fuck you.
Those days are over.
Yeah, good. Thank God. Damn. I can see your ugly ass face everywhere. Damn.
That's right.
Me in the face, Eric Adams. Please punch me in the face. I would love.
Well, there was an instance with Eric Adams walking off of an airplane, deboarding, and standing next to someone who was started that whole altercation that we saw by saying, "Please, Eric Adams, please punch me in the face." What was she responding to? Apparently, as eyewitnesses pointed out, they said that the lady saw Eric Adams sitting on the plane, maybe about to leave, and she started booing him. She goes, "Boo, boo." Eric Adams, now a former mayor of New York. Then after that whole thing went down, he just apparently, this is what the eyewitness went on to say, was he then threatened to punch her in the face, and that's where it picked up with her talking about please do it. Please do it. As he also apparently said something along the lines of the Brooklyn's gonna come back on me. I'm not the mayor anymore. I don't know if everyone in Brooklyn really wants to co-sign with being the type of person who punches women in the face, but apparently that's, according to Eric Adams, what Brooklyn is all about. Also, Adams spokesperson Todd Shapiro told the New York Post that Adams is now a private citizen and he was harassed. I don't know how many private citizens have spokespeople that speak for them when they get into altercations at the airport, but Eric Adams is one of them. Shapiro also dismissed the clip as selectively edited and lacking some critical context. Was the context that he was offended by someone booing him? It's up to him to be offended by someone booing him. I'd be offended by someone that doesn't like me. Not necessarily offended. I would just, feel hurt by someone just not liking me to my face in public. I'm like, what did I do? What? I mean, was I part of trying to make sure that I apologize for this president? Was I part of like some corruption within my tenure as mayor? Did people not like the work that I did as mayor? Maybe that's the reason why someone may boo him. So instead of looking inward and instead speaking about how he was all on board with this corrupt fascist president in the White House and try to make sure they get by, he didn't like being booed. Therefore, he's going to punch some woman in her face. So maybe Shapiro, his spokesperson for this private citizen, maybe he had a point. Because I did see someone that posted a picture and also pointed out how lovely Eric Adams truly was. There's two sides of the coin, I suppose. Here's the picture, first of all. I'm not sure if it was the younger person or the woman in the middle here, standing next to Eric Adams in that same, off of that same flight. This was her account. Eyewitness truth bomb. New York Post got it all wrong about Eric Adams on that flight. She goes, I was there. Same plane from LaGuardia to Dallas. Adams Humble, quiet gentleman. Took 25 plus photos with fans, chatted Yankees, Mets, Eagles with my wife and son like old friends. Sat and coached right in front of me. Pure class. Let tons of people deplane first in the DFW heat. Total pro. Then some unhinged libtard in a mask lost it on the hot delayed plane, attacked him while we were stuck. Media spins it as Adams being the problem. Nah, he handled it like a boss. And then had some link for him in the New York Post. And she goes, die hard red conservative here. Bravo, Eric Adams. You deserve respect. I'm not sure if that person can elaborate on the respect that Eric Adams deserves. The only qualifications that apparently they've got there is that they're a diehard red conservative and that they call other folks libtards. I think we can understand where their position may have coming from and why they were so hardcore on trying to clear Eric Adams' name. I guess they have it all wrong. Eric Adams wasn't telling someone, fuck you back, and fuck you again. Eric Adams wasn't saying, I'm going to punch you in the face because the Brooklyn's going to come back out of me. Apparently, he was pure class. It's not what we saw on tape. It's what that self-described diehard red conservative said. Which leads me to the video that I think everyone did see. And if you didn't, I made sure that you understood what happened in it, where it started, and apparently also where it ended. This was Donald Trump at a Ford plant up in Michigan. And as you can see, everyone at the plant wasn't too happy. Pause for a second. I'm replaying this over, but without all of my graphics over the top. As you saw, he was called a pedophile protector, then he runs off. I want you guys to pay attention also to, I guess, the lackey, the staffer, whoever it is that with him, as Trump tries to aggressively, forcefully point at someone who he's very upset about in the way that they've called him a pedophile protector because, he's protecting pedophiles, including himself, by this cover-up of the Epstein files. Look at the guy, and I think it's like a purple button-up. He was upset too, and check out his, lackey minion-like reaction. What a little chump you are. So this guy, who is disliked by so many in this country because he's destroying it at every turn, starts to point, toss stubby little middle fingers at people, and this guy has to stand over the edge and be like, yeah, you're gonna get it. Are these 10-year-old bullies in the schoolyard? My buddy, he said, fuck you. Yeah, he said it twice. You know what? You're gonna get it. What's he pointing at someone for? The guy in the purple shirt. What's he pointing at people for? What are you gonna do, bro? Who are you? Whatever. So there was that. And similarly, unlike Eric Adams, who is a private citizen but still has a spokesperson, still, unlike that guy, Donald Trump is still in office, sadly. And he also has a spokesperson, Stephen Chung. And he said about this altercation, which I guess was just a shouting match back and forth, said a lunatic was wildly screaming expletives in a complete fit of rage. And the president gave an appropriate and unambiguous response. That was a statement that Stephen Chung gave to the Washington Post. Isn't it weird? A lunatic is the person who's screaming expletives, but the lunatic isn't the president of the United States who's tossing middle fingers and also screaming these things that we call expletives back at the guy in a very presidential manner. Here's some details about, I guess, depending on which side you're coming from, the hero in this situation. His name is TJ Sabula, and he's a 40-year-old United Auto Workers local 600 line worker at that factory. And he told the Post that he was the one who shouted at Trump. He said that he has since been suspended from work pending an investigation. Ford plant up here is suspending this guy for speaking his mind. Weird. Here's a quote. As far as calling him out, definitely no regrets whatsoever. Though he added that he is concerned about the future of his job and believes he's been targeted for political retribution for embarrassing Trump in front of his friends. I get the idea this guy doesn't like him some Trump all that much. But again, I think the main vein of this whole thing is, which I'm not sure how many people are reporting it, this guy's getting suspended by Ford for speaking his mind, not cursing, but accurately calling Donald Trump a pedophile protector. maybe because he's protecting pedophiles. Is the Ford auto company involved with pedophiles and protecting them as well too? Because apparently the person who's speaking the truth, they suspended for speaking the truth to power. It's almost like fascism is like really pumping through this country's veins, and everybody, even of these private businesses with these factories, when the dictator visits, you have to suspend your worker because retribution and revenge has to come from simple truths. It must have really struck him in his heart. Here's more. In a statement to CBS, a Ford spokesperson said, one of our core values is respect, and we don't condone anyone saying anything inappropriate like that within our facilities. When that happens, we have a process to deal with it, but we don't get into specific personnel matters. It feels like even if they don't do anything to this guy, they're trying to make sure that Donald Trump thinks that they did something to him so that he can feel better and thinks that he's flexed his muscles. But I do think they're going to do something to this guy. These folks probably want to make sure they have their follow-up and their pound of flesh from someone who actually speaks their mind, an American citizen who still has his First Amendment rights to speak his mind. But apparently Ford doesn't condone anyone saying anything inappropriate like that. I guess it's appropriate to say fuck you a couple of times and toss middle fingers at the guy, because that's what someone else that was visiting your plant did. But he's the president, so I guess he can do whatever the hell he wants. It's weird how that works. It's almost like he's a dictator or something. Here's more. Sabula identifies as politically independent and said he never voted for Trump, but has supported other Republicans. He estimated that he is roughly 60 feet away from Trump on Tuesday and that the president could hear him very, very, very clearly. He said he was specifically referencing Trump's handling of Epstein, of course. He says, I don't feel as though fate looks upon you often. And when it does, you better be ready to seize the opportunity. And today, I think I did that. You know what, Mr. Sabula? I agree. I think you seized the opportunity and you made the best of your opportunity in your moment. And Ford is completely screwing this up. Because now, I was thinking this. An online fundraiser was started on Tuesday evening, sought to raise money for Sabula after this suspension. Let's rally and support TJ and help him pay some bills, is what the description of the fundraiser said, which had collected more than $150,000 as of this morning. So that was this morning. I'm not sure how much more it's collected, if it's carried some steam, or if, people are turning on Mr. Sabula. And maybe he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But again, I want you guys to notice something. A private citizen. Let's see if we can find it. By the way, I didn't independently find this fundraiser for TJ Sabula. So if you guys find it on your own, have at it. I wish I could have looked it up to make sure, because of course, I assume things like this, people sometimes put up some fake ones to try and game the system a little bit there. But still, apparently TJ Sabula is suspended for speaking his mind to Donald Trump about him protecting pedophiles, which is obvious that he's doing. Let's not forget that part. I wonder if there's going to be any punishment from, maybe Thomas Massey's bosses for saying very similar things as he was, followed around and asked about his opposition to the things that Donald Trump is up to. Here's Thomas Massey, I think pretty much saying similar things that TJ said.
How's it going?
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Wait, so Congressman, in the last 2 weeks, you repeated AOC's talking points on Venezuela, and Jasmine Crockett has retweeted you. When will you change your party affiliation to Democrat?
I thought you knew. I vote with Republicans 91% of the time.
It seems,
And the 9% I don't, they're taken up for pedophiles, starting another war, or bankrupting our country.
I don't know about that, Congressman. We'll see.
Not releasing.
Loomer unleashed. I think they thought they had him cornered there. Isn't it a damn shame? And I've been saying this too. Thomas Massey is a super, super conservative. Thomas Massey is a hardcore conservative. Thomas Massey loved him some Donald Trump, and Donald Trump loved him some Thomas Massey. That is, except for those three things that Thomas Massey pointed out that he's voting against this guy on: protecting pedophiles, bankrupting the country, and starting these more wars overseas as he's begging for someone else's Nobel Peace Prize. I think those are pretty basic things that Thomas Massey is on the right side of history in voting against this guy on. But Thomas Massey still votes 91% of the time with these guys on everything else. I don't want conservatives to forget that, and I don't want libs and progressives to forget that either. This guy is still a conservative. He just happens to, maybe not want to condone pedophilia. It's weird how that works. He's got that principle, at least that one at hand. God, You didn't really. I don't think the gotcha was much of a gotcha there. So he was at this Ford plant. Back to Donald Trump. He was at that Ford plant having photo ops and talk about how great the economy is and how wonderful things are. And he's a great guy for the independent. I mean the blue collar worker up in states like Michigan, blue collar cities like Detroit. Except when he talked to then Tony DeCopel. Man, this guy's popping up a lot lately. The CBS News guy. He talked to Mr. DeCopel, and he was specifically talking about the issues that they have with employment numbers, the economy, and even more specifically when it comes to this Ford plant. Here's what he had to say.
President, I'm just trying to be fair here, just trying to do my job, and I want to talk about this assembly line here.
To me, it's vibrant. Listen to the sound.
It's incredible, right?
I love the sound of an assembly line.
It's incredible. But they've got one not far from here. They just idled the electric vehicle plant.
Well, yeah, but it's going to gasoline vehicles.
Yeah, it's going to go to gasoline.
Well, but why don't you say that, Tony? You can't say.
You didn't give me a chance. I'm coming there. I'm coming around.
I agree. I said I want electric and I want gasoline and I want hybrids. I want everything. But you were going to be forced under the mandate to buy an electric car in a very short period of time. I didn't want that, and I ended that. Now people can have electric, they can have gasoline, they can have hybrid.
But are they going to have people to build these cars? The CEO of Ford said not long ago he's got 5,000 open mechanic jobs. He can't find people willing and able to build them.
That's a good thing, Tony. That means it's vibrant. You could also have things where you have so many people and they can't get jobs. It's true. We are doing so well. It's hard. Now, what's going to happen is people are being trained rapidly, and you're going to have a thing called robots, and robots are going to be a big factor. I predict that robots are going to be a big factor in the future, and it's going to help out. But you have a situation now where our economy is doing so well that it's not that easy to get people.
That doesn't make any sense. But the main thing you should probably remember is that Donald Trump said, even though they got this shortfall of employees that can fill these roles, it's good news. We've got robots that'll do it because Donald Trump is in favor of, employment in America. Donald Trump is in favor of American prosperity. That is, as long as you're a robot American. Is anybody going to listen to this guy talk and actually start paying attention to what it is that he's saying? We have, again, the most anemic job creation numbers all year. It's the worst it's been since like 2003. But this guy is now saying it's good news. We've got more robots to fill those roles. We fired tons of people in the federal government, and we've got none of those agencies working, again, for the American people who continue to pay taxes. But it's going to be wonderful because we're going to keep replacing American workers with robots. Does that sound like America first? The blue collar, rah, red-blooded American to you? Or does it sound like someone who thinks prosperity is based in the richest folks who run these corporations to replace workers with robots being prosperous? Because, by the way, the issue that one of the Ford CEOs or top executives talked about was their 5,000 numbers of mechanics that they're trying to hire into these places, being dealerships or even in these car manufacturing plants. And there's just not enough people that are trained up on it enough. Except the kind of training that they now need is based in the kinds of computers that are basically becoming these cars. They're no longer the old school cars. And folks aren't trained up on that. It's a transition of a progression of how we do things in the world. And we're way behind on all of that. It's almost like we limit people's education. It's almost like we pit people against each other based off of things like their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their transness. All of this is what they're pitting people against each other on while we're not being educated. And also our education system is being dismantled and also handed out to more oligarchs. It's weird, but he's happy with all that because what's prosperity to him is robots while you're sitting at home. And then while this guy's getting suspended at the Ford plant for accurately calling Donald Trump a pedophile protector. Let all that sink in. Read this article from Business Insider. It gives you all the ins and outs and the details behind the issues that are coming with these hiring issues of what Ford said they need 5,000 more. Many of these people that are potentially trying to get these roles The amount that they say they're paying isn't that amount. The amount of output, previous money you have to put for things like your tools and your equipment that you would have to pay for yourself to work for Ford is exorbitant, and people can't afford it, because they don't have jobs. Again, just read details. There's gray area. There's a lot that you could actually learn from it. I learned some things about it. You have to read and not listen to Donald Trump. Okay, because by the way, there is some issues with training up more folks. We just don't focus on that stuff. And now when it's getting tough and we're looking at it in our faces, this guy's answer is robots. Let's move on. I have a lot to talk about. I have so much going, but I like starting with Eric Adams. It was fun. But before we transition, let me take a glance again over at the chat here, you guys. I'm going to like this stream. If you haven't done it yet, what's going on? What's wrong? What did I do to you? Just like it. We can share it. We can also come back and check these videos out later. They'll be up later on the stream. And if you're new to this whole thing, we do it every day at noon Eastern for like an hour, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes. I just can't do that today. I'm going to try, though. The amount of things I want to talk about takes about an hour and 15 minutes. Let's move on. Let's shift some gears. I told you guys the other day, since we're seeing a little bit more of the resistance in the streets to this Gestapo, Donald Trump's Gestapo that he's sent into the streets to attack American citizens and now, murder more of them after, shoving thousands of them into concentration camps where we'll never see them again. All that's happening. Finally, we're seeing something from some of these folks who assisted in this guy's campaign and his stupid mindset that engulfed so many Americans. One of those people, his name is Joe Rogan. It's January of 2026. This guy is beginning to figure it out.
You don't want militarized people in the streets just roaming around, snatching people up, many of which turn out to actually be U.S. citizens that just don't have their papers on them. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to? You don't want military.
Yes, Joe Rogan. That's what we've come to. Joe Rogan, there was these people that you and your ilk were calling people with Trump derangement syndrome, or people that couldn't get a joke, or they're too busy getting trolled, that said, what are we going to be? The Gestapo, where you got secret police in the streets just randomly arresting people and taking them away? Is that what we really want to be? Apparently, that's what you want it to be, because when Donald Trump was on the campaign trail saying that's what he wants to be, you said, that's so funny. Keep trolling those libs. That is until we saw this guy come into office and do this weird thing. You'll never guess, Joe, in case you've been missing it for the past year. What we've got is a guy who came into office and he's got masked military guys in the streets, Proud Boys and racists that they're recruiting to do these things, and they're snatching people out of their cars, kind of like, the Gestapo.
Hey, go that way. Hey, back the fuck up.
Sidewalk. Force is not law. Force is not law. You are not following the law.
Police before I'm disabled, so I can go to the doctor up there. That's why I didn't
Just make you feel strong. You're a man. This is your duty. Why don't you help that woman? Help that woman. Why don't you help someone? All you do is hurt. All you do is hurt. She's trying to drag down the Where is the law?
So, as you probably heard there, as they snatched that woman out of her car, she said she's disabled and driving to her doctor. That's why I stopped. I was trying to go up that way. That is before her windows got busted out. People cut open her seatbelt, snatched her out of the car, threw her hands behind her back, and then apparently stole her car as that other agent just decided to take off in it. It's weird. It's like people saw it coming, and also before it came, people warned the folks that were saying they're going to vehemently vote for this to happen. They said you're going to be on the wrong side of history, where you're going to be then complaining about how it's happening all around you. Here's that same guy, Joe Rogan. He's coming to a few more conclusions.
Then they start showing up at Home Depot instead of like looking for gangbangers, looking for criminals and cartel members. They go to whatever's easiest pickings so they can get numbers up. There's do you know Ed Calderon? Do you know who he is? He worked he was a Mexican military guy who now is an American citizen, but he reports extensively on the cartels, and just was telling me some horror stories about ICE raids. And one of them was they took this guy who'd been brought over here when he was a baby, but didn't have American citizenship. His family, came over here illegally, lived here for 20 years, can't speak Spanish. They deport him, send him to Tijuana.
Can't speak Spanish.
Can't speak Spanish. Does not speak Spanish. He is essentially an American citizen. He just never lived anywhere else. He just doesn't have the paperwork. He's not a criminal. They sent him over to Tijuana, and now he has to live in Mexico. He doesn't know what the fuck to do. He's on the streets. Has no idea. He doesn't have any money.
Joe Rogan's coming to a few more revelations. This time, the very unique, never heard of story before this guy was in office. Never heard of story of someone being born in this country, maybe coming here when they were an infant and then growing up their entire life, as an American in this country. And then now when Donald Trump and his white supremacists get into office, send them off to another country that they've never been to, don't know the language, don't know the way to get along there. Nothing. And now Joe Rogan is amazed. He said, did you know this happened? Yo, did you guys know that Donald Trump is going to be sending people to countries that they've never lived in? Except the fact that there was a lot of people that knew that, Joe. And when they were trying to tell you that, you laughed in their face, or you said that I can't believe you're overreacting and none of that ever going to happen because this is the United States of America. Maybe if he watches this, he could also understand that this is still the United States of America.
I am U.S. citizen.
Do you have an ID on you, ma'am?
I don't need an ID to walk around in my city. This is my
Okay,
city.
do you have
This is
some
my
ID
home.
then, please?
I don't need an
If
ID.
not, we're going to put you in the vehicle. We're going to ID you. Huh?
I'm not going to take out. You take out your ID.
You don't have an ID?
I'm not going to take out an ID.
Hey, man,
I am U.S. citizen. I am U.S. citizen.
All right, can we see an ID, please?
I am U.S. citizen. I don't need to carry around an ID in my home.
Well,
This is my home.
Where were you born?
This is my home.
Where were you born?
Minneapolis is my home.
Ma'am, we're doing an immigration check. We're doing a citizen check.
This is where
and we're asking you where you were born.
This is where I belong. This is my home.
Ma'am, you can belong here, but where were you born?
And I am not going to give you an ID.
Then we're going to put you in the vehicle until we can ID you.
I belong here. I should be walking around here free. I shouldn't be afraid in my life at this point.
Ma'am, do you have an
You
ID
making
to
me
give
a
us?
skirt? No.
Yes, you're correct.
You making me a scared. You making me a
Do you
panic.
have an ID?
This is my home.
Ma'am, where were you born?
I am U.S. citizen. I am U.S. citizen. And I don't think so. You have a right to picture me while I am in my home and walking around in my home. This is not acceptable. You guys, you're terrorizing people.
Ma'am,
and it's not
where
acceptable.
were you born?
It doesn't matter where I was born. I belong here. I am U.S. citizen. What else can I say? I am citizen. This is my home.
You realize that if you lie that you're a U.S. citizen,
Minneapolis is my home.
then you can get
Minneapolis is
federal
my
charges.
home. I belong here. I'm sorry. I belong here. I'm not gonna take out an ID. What the fuck?
I guess next week Joe Rogan will say, "Did you know that they're just randomly?" First off, he's realized they're going to Home Depots and places where people are looking for work before they're snatching people up, talking about the worst of the worst that they kept claiming. Did you know that they're trolling around Minneapolis and they're picking out anybody that they think looks Somali American, and then they're going to question about where they're from because we're going to throw you in the back of this car and then identify you. Again, more empty threats. I want to make sure that we also remember that as the resistance continues to grow. Joe Rogan is learning a whole lot. The weirdest thing is now that he's so woke, his eyes were awake enough to notice what happened the last week when Renee Good was shot and killed by these same ICE agents that he's amazed are in the streets, masked up, snatching people out of cars, acting like Trump's Gestapo. Are we getting there? Now that woman was killed, he has these new revelations.
It's also very ugly to watch someone shoot a U.S. citizen, especially a woman, in the face.
Right.
Where it's like, I'm not that guy. I don't know what he thought. And again, this is a guy who had almost been run over, but it just looked horrific to me. I mean, when people say it's justifiable because the car hit him, it seemed like she was kind of turning the car away. It's also very ugly to watch.
Do you think now Joe Rogan is going to continue on with his revelations about who Donald Trump is, who Stephen Miller is, who Tom Homan is, who all these guys are that are running this entire organization, this crime organization from the White House? Is he going to finally be like, everything that they say must have been a lie? Everything that they're not telling us must also be, a lie. Everything, all this aggression and violence that we're seeing in the streets must be getting triggered by them, because now I'm realizing all the stuff that I was believing that they told me was bullshit. And now that I realize it, I need to flip the script and stop talking as if they're any kind of reputable human beings with principles that we should follow behind. I wonder if he's going to continue to make that flip, or if he's just going to have a couple moments here and there where he talks about what he's finally seeing that was flying right in the face of what is it people like him were denying that we would soon see. I got more. I got a little bit more. Considering Joe Rogan is noticed of what it looked like in that scene from every angle that was seen of that woman getting murdered, I wonder then, since he saw it that way with his eyes wide open now, I wonder if he's going to have a different thought about the guy who, when he gets interviewed about this, specifically about Renee Good and her father and the way he felt about it. I wonder if Joe Rogan's feelings are going to change about Donald Trump.
I've got an important question about the situation in Minnesota, the death of Renee Nicole Good. I've been speaking to her father, who is a big supporter of yours, like many Americans are, but he's heartbroken right now.
I can understand.
He's heartbroken because his daughter is dead. That's
Sure.
obvious. He's also heartbroken because your administration so quickly has come out and said she's a domestic terrorist. What do you want to say to her father right now?
Well, I want to say to the father that I love all of our people. They can be on the other side. As you say, he might be on my side.
He is on your side.
And I think that's great. And I do. I think it's great. And I would bet you that she, under normal circumstances, was a very solid, wonderful person. But, her actions were pretty tough. I mean, I've seen it many ways and many different shapes and forms. But the bottom line is, look, we have hundreds of thousands of murderers in our countries, killers. ICE is trying to get them out. They were let in through an open border policy of Sleepy Joe Biden. ICE is working very hard to get them out. Their job is being made very, very difficult. And, when you look at that tape, it can be viewed two ways, I guess. But when you look at the way that car was pulled away, there are a couple of versions of that tape that are very, very bad.
I want to talk about the economy while we have you here.
No, you don't. Isn't it bad that Tony DeCopel has to try and emphasize the fact that Renee Good's father is a Trump supporter, and therefore Donald Trump should suddenly care about how he feels about how his daughter was murdered only because he's a Trump supporter, which Donald Trump tried to push away as maybe that's not the case because I'm about to talk trash about your daughter again. That was supposed to be the hook that's going to make this guy give a damn about anyone. He's flipped his supporters aside many times. What makes you think he's going to care about the father of the woman that was killed just because that guy votes for Donald Trump and believes in his ass somehow? I'm not convinced that her father no longer believes in Donald Trump. We've seen those supporters be like, man, you can take my kids and send them off to some other country I've never seen before, but I ride behind Donald Trump. That's how thick and heavy this, this cult runs. I'm waiting for more revelations, I suppose. All these bro podcasts and all their support for Donald Trump are finally starting to realize a few things. So, like before with whoever else that figured something else about their life out, it was the Exxon CEO, wasn't even figuring nothing out. When he rejected this whole thing in Venezuela, don't give them any credit because Joe Rogan's finally figuring something out. Give Joe Rogan credit when he finally starts acting as heavily as he did in opposition to anyone who was speaking the same truths that he suddenly got in his brain. Joe Rogan is a thought leader. He's figuring this whole thing out suddenly. Did you know that Donald Trump is a fascist? Maybe we shouldn't be afraid of calling a fascist because then if we do, we'll continue to provide cover for them so they can continue to implement their fascism, which oddly can affect people's lives. People are dying because we've hidden the fact that he's a pedophile fascist. It's weird how we just keep allowing him to get away with these things. That is until it finally starts knocking at your front door. Let's move on. I had more, but I'm going to skip the rest of it. Let's move on. There's more happening. And since we were just up in Minnesota noticing how Trump's Gestapo is acting towards folks, let's stay where his mind is, which is on Ilhan Omar, and all those Somali Americans up there that Donald Trump hates. There was something else. Maybe this is the next thing that Joe Rogan's going to have some kind of a new revelation on. Did you know, Joe? Did you know that Donald Trump is a racist piece of shit? Donald Trump knows it.
We intend to imprison any fraudster, politician, or public official involved in these sick plots to loot and pillage our country. Think of that Ilhan Omar. She lives in Somalia. They don't have a government. They don't have a military. They don't have police. They don't have anything. All they have is murder and robbing ships, bringing in ships, pirates. That's stopped. Same missile, ping. That's the end of them. It's amazing how that can stop corruption. Those missiles, they never miss, The same one, exactly the same one. But think of it. She comes from a country with nothing, and she comes here and she tells us about our Constitution. I have a constitutional right to rip off the country. I guess she's a total scam artist. Anybody knows it. How do you let her get away with it? AOC +3. She was one of the three. They're all scammers. They're so bad for our country. They're so bad for our country.
Donald Trump is a racist. Donald Trump is obsessed with talking about Ilhan Omar because he's got a list of stereotypes about Somalis that he is all about spewing every chance he gets. And whoever it is that's sitting in that room listening to him spew this nonsense is the same way. He says all they got is murder, robbing, and pirates. This guy watches too many movies. All they've got, Somalia is full of it. That's all that's there. And what his remedy is, as he's talking about Ilhan Omar, an elected official from the same state that he's currently attacking, are missiles. It'll take them out easy. They never miss. So if you say, I've got missiles, I've got a big gun, I've got things that never miss, I'm a sniper. If Donald Trump walks around in the wrong place, shoo, do you think you'd be in trouble for saying that? Or do you think Donald Trump can then say, anybody who looks like Ilhan Omar coming from that no good country that has nothing and has the nerve to come and talk to us about our Constitution, which I'm violating every day, if any of that happens, I get to go kill them because they're scam artists. Donald Trump calls people frauds. He calls people scam artists. Do you think he calls Senator Rick Scott a scammer or a con artist? Do you think so? Because, if he did, he'd be accurate.
It is one of the biggest criminal investigations of an American corporation ever.
We're executing a search warrant.
In the past few months, hundreds of federal agents have raided at least 70 of Colombia's hospitals and offices in 7 states.
Rick Scott promised explosive growth to shareholders, but to insiders, Rick Scott could be ruthless.
They seem to care more about profits than medicine.
Good old-fashioned fraud, lying for money.
Over the last decade, Colombia has made its stockholders and executives rich.
The company cheated the Medicare program, and they knew what they were doing.
Regularly filing false Medicare reports and overcharging the government.
Charging the government for everything from Kentucky Derby tickets to country club memberships.
False claims submitted to the government year after year over the course of hundreds of hospitals. Their promotions depended on it. Their bonuses depended on it.
For-profit hospital chain HCA, formerly called Columbia HCA, will plead guilty to criminal conduct.
$745 million to settle charges of fraud in Medicare billing.
Rick Scott and 5 other top corporate executives have resigned, and federal investigators told ABC News today that Scott is now considered a prime target of the investigation. Scott could...
Have you heard Donald Trump talking about how much of a fraudster Rick Scott is? Or have you heard Donald Trump praising Rick Scott? Well, also Rick Scott praises Donald Trump. It's almost like if you kiss his ass enough, he'll love you and he'll actually have nothing to say about all the fraud that you were involved in. A record-breaking fraud. This guy is a fraudster, but he's not black. He's not from Somalia. So therefore, Donald Trump and the rest of his white supremacists don't think so, because Rick Scott kisses Donald Trump's ass like he did when he sent those troops into D.C. Rick Scott said, let me put my face in front of a camera and kiss Donald Trump's ass.
All of this, your reaction to the president's moves?
I think he's doing absolutely the right thing. You know, the first thing I tell everybody when they're going to come to D.C. is I said, you need to be careful. You need to be careful where you stay. Be careful where you walk. Depending on what street you're on, you shouldn't be out over after dark. You got to be very careful up here. So I'm very appreciative of what the president's doing. I'm part of a bill that Mike Lee's leading. Actually, take home rule back and give it back to Congress, where we should be the ones responsible for the safety. But the president's doing the right thing. I applaud him for what he's doing.
I mean, these.
Donald Trump, apparently, if Rick Scott kisses his ass enough, he can be forgiven for all that, fraud that he's about. While we're on the subject of fraud, there's a lot of them going on in Mississippi. I looked this up really fast. I was like, there's Mississippi fraud cases. I know specifically with Brett Favre, but I didn't know about all the rest of these. Ted DiBiase Jr. trial. It starts this month. The first major trial in the welfare scandal involves Ted DiBiase Jr., accused of taking over $1 million in welfare funds via sham contracts for his companies, spending it on luxury items. What a welfare queen. He should be in prison. Here's another Mississippi welfare scandal. A massive investigation into misused federal welfare funds involving nonprofit organizations implicating numerous figures in a scheme to divert money for personal use, including stadium construction. That sounds like people with access to money and political power. Here, John Davis, former head of the Mississippi Department of Human Services, has pleaded guilty to state and federal charges in the welfare scandal. Have you heard Donald Trump talking about all the welfare scandals that are going on down in Mississippi as they take money from poor folks? Hey, here's another one. Brett Favre. This is the most pain in the ass one. The former NFL quarterback is involved in the welfare scandal, but has not been criminally charged, though he's being sued by the state for repayment of funds used for a volleyball facility. And here's the last one. Medicare fraud case, just November of last year, 2025. A Mississippi businessman pleaded guilty in late 2025 for a $19 million scheme involving kickbacks for fraudulent doctors' orders for medical equipment. Do you hear Donald Trump talking about how all these folks in Mississippi, all these white businessmen and rich former football players and all these assholes, do you hear him talking about how they've got corruption and scam artists in their blood? Have you heard him talk about how then they need to maybe shoot a missile at one of them and how they're going to lecture us about the economy, our constitution, and rule of law when they're breaking all of those things? Do you think he's going to talk about any of those people? He's not going to talk about any of those people because they're not Somali American. He doesn't think he has an easy target, then spread more of his hate and send more of his fucking Proud Boys through the streets to attack people and intimidate them. That's why he's not talking about that. But there's fraud everywhere. And everywhere Donald Trump finds fraud, he does this. As long as they look like this guy. He pardons ex-Tennessee state senator who was in prison for campaign. Here's that weird word again. Fraud. It's odd. He keeps like pardoning the folks who are committing fraud and then attacking the folks that aren't because they're black. Here's another instance. It's almost like ongoing. President Trump issues full pardon to Joseph Schwartz, a nursing home owner. Sounds like he's got money, who withheld $39 million in payroll taxes from 15,000 employees, but never sent that money to the IRS. It's almost like it's fraud or something. It was like fraudulent, but Donald Trump is on board with that guy. Let me tell you more about Joseph Schwartz, who Donald Trump doesn't think deserves a missile to the forehead. Schwartz was sentenced in federal court in April to 36 months. 36 months. All this sorry son bitch was going to get was 3 years for his role in this $38 million employment tax fraud scheme, having willfully failed to pay taxes that he owed. Sounds a lot like the president. He withheld the amounts from employees' paychecks, then pocketed it. His financial misdeeds also left grocery bills unpaid, and in some instances, forcing nursing home staff, the staff for the nursing home that this guy owns and has millions of dollars through, to buy food for their residents. The staff members. Trump granted Schwartz a full and unconditional pardon in November, erasing any penalties for his federal charges and setting him loose after serving only 3 months of that 3-year sentence. But Donald Trump wants to talk to you and lecture you about how these Somalis are so fraudulent and it's in their blood. They're pirates, they're murderers, they're criminals. All that happens over there in their shithole country is crime. Therefore, the guy that's sitting in the White House unleashing crime on the country apparently does not run a shithole country. Hey, you guys want more examples? There's this guy, his name is David Gentile. It's this odd thing he's got. He doesn't have to pay this $15.5 million restitution after Trump commuted his sentence. He was convicted in August of 2024 of conspiring to defraud, there's that weird word again, fraud thousands of investors in a capital funds scheme that totaled $1.6 billion. Billion dollars. Maybe the guy has, maybe David Gentile has like a Somali background. Gentile sounds like a Somali name. But there were victims of David Gentile's fraud scheme. It's just Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about those people. One of those people talked about the way that they've been trying to struggle and, recoup their lives ever since.
Carol Ann, thanks you for joining us. You lost nearly $500,000. You have been able to claw back 40,000, but most of it's gone. What was your reaction when you heard that President Trump had commuted Gentile sentence, so he only served 12 days of a 7-year sentence?
I'm totally disgusted because it wasn't only myself, it was my elder mother in her 90s and my sister as well. We all got defrauded.
What would you say to President Trump if he were watching right now?
I'd ask him why he did this. It makes no sense. I don't have an answer as to why this guy can do what he did, basically build a Ponzi scheme, walk out scot-free. And you got Bernie Madoff, who had to live it out, and people were returned funds. I had to hire, with the help of Adam, who did a great job, claw back a measly pauper sum of nothing. And it makes no sense to me. I don't understand why.
So Carol Ann,
who bought him off?
Carol Ann, who bought Trump off? Is that what you're asking?
No.
Who bought
off David? Gentile off.
Yeah.
Who did Gentile have to pay to get out?
There you got it there, lady. It was Trump that he had to pay to get off. But I want to bring it all back to the main source. In case we forgot, we went through Rick Scott, we went through David Gentile, we went to Joseph Schwartz, we went to some more random folks up in Mississippi that he doesn't give a damn about whether or not they're fraudsters. He's focused on Ilhan Omar. I think she speaks too much truth and it strikes him right in his cold, dark heart. He pardons fraudsters and he celebrates fraudsters because there's a very clear example as to why.
Guilty on all counts. A Manhattan jury tonight convicting 2 of former President Trump's family businesses on 17 counts, including conspiracy and criminal tax fraud, after fewer than 11 hours of deliberation. The case against the Trump Organization reaching back more than a decade.
This was a case about lying and cheating, false documents to the end of evading taxes for the benefit of individuals and the corporations. They've now been held accountable in a court of law.
Fraud. Donald Trump is a fraudster. Donald Trump has fraud and con man blood in his system. It's in his genes. That's where Donald Trump comes from. A long line of fraudster, criminal, rapist, pedophiles. And apparently he likes to cover for them as soon as he can. Very last thing. Don't listen to me call Donald Trump a fraudster and a liar and a piece of trash. Listen to his vice president, J.D. Vance. He said the same thing before he got the opportunity to join, the fraudster brigade.
And I cannot stand Trump because I think he's a fraud. Well, I think he's a total fraud that is exploiting these people, who is a total fraud.
I agree with you on Trump because I don't think that he's the person. I don't think he actually cares about folks.
But I think that I'm going to vote for. I'm going to vote third party because I can't stomach Trump. I think that he's noxious and is leading the white working class to a very dark place.
Well, it's almost like everyone knows who this guy is. That is until they get some kind of political or economic opportunity to kiss his ass and think that they're going to stand behind the dictator for a little bit of prosperity. What losers these guys are. What a pathetic country this is. How horrible is that? But you're a bad guy if you call it out and want something, maybe these pedophiles to be held accountable for their actions. Maybe these fraudsters to not get their sentences commuted and not have to pay any restitution forever because Donald Trump is a fraudster. I got one more that I'm going to pump through here, you guys. I got to keep on going down. I may go over a little bit, so if you guys take off, give me a few minutes. At least you might want to stick around for it. But if not, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Appreciate you. I love you. But give me a few more minutes as we jump into this last little bit here. I spoke yesterday about the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, now being under investigation. And there was a little bit of pushback. But this roller coaster is going all over the place. I didn't even want to talk about the Fed chair again, but as I kept looking at the way people are talking about this and the way that the cover-ups and potentially the backpedaling is going down, I wonder how clean this is really going to come out. Donald Trump was committed to it, but even his buddy Scott Jennings, the big ass kisser over on CNN, he had a small warning for Donald Trump and his approach to Jerome Powell.
There are practical implications to the president's decision-making here or the administration's decision-making. I don't know that the president personally had anything to do with it. And that is on the Hill. If he wants to replace Jerome Powell in May with a new Fed chair, you're going to have confirmation issues. I mean, that's the first most politically practical problem that you have with this. I would think the second biggest problem is when you interview people for this, whoever you want to pick is going to ask you, are you going to come after me if I displease you? And so you may have trouble attracting the people that you want for the job. So I don't know where this is going. I actually agree with Senator Thune. If you're going to get into something like this, you better have something, because if you don't, you're creating a whole raft of political problems when really the outcome you want is to get rid of this guy and to get your own person there that you think is going to set better monetary policy. That now seems to be a bit more complicated.
Scott Jennings has those kind of warnings for Donald Trump as far as going after Jerome Powell with these investigations. He agrees with John Thune. You better have something or else there's going to be a whole raft of political issues. Where are those political issues going to come from? From you? Are you going to begin talking about how devastating and destructive this administration is and how they're weaponizing the Department of Justice to go after people, to bully them? Are you going to do any of that? Because we've already seen that happen. We've seen 5 cases get tossed out that his Department of Justice followed his lead to go after his political enemies for going after him legally and busting his ass. And he's now doing it back towards them. Now is the moment when you're kind of cautious about him utilizing the Department of Justice to go after this guy. It's weird. So Scott Jennings has enough brain power to point out how corrupt this guy is, how backstabby he is, how he's using the system for his own revenge tour. Are you going to keep supporting him? That should always be the next question. Whenever one of these conservatives come out and say a bit of truth, you're going to be like, oh, so you get it. Do you still support him? Are you now on board for what you say you've now woken up to? I don't think Scott Jennings is going to be asked that question. Matter of fact, he did point out that one thing, maybe because Tom Tillis keeps promising that Donald Trump's nominees are going to be blocked for the Fed unless they figure this whole thing out. I didn't give Tom Tillis much leeway on this other day, so I'll run it again. I'll give him up until confirmation hearings before he backpedals on this. But this is what he said.
The investigation set off alarm bells for some Republicans. North Carolina's Tom Tillis vowed to block any Trump nominees to the Federal Reserve.
Another example of amateur hour as far as I'm concerned.
Just a flashback. Tom Tillis is ready to block all nominees because it's a clown show. It's crazy how this whole thing is working out. There was another guy who was speaking out on this. Senator Kevin Cramer. He wasn't too keen on these investigations. Remember, this is where the pressure is coming from. Pay attention to what Kevin Cramer said the other day, because I've got an update on how he feels about it right now. This is the flashback.
I don't think Jay Powell's a criminal. If we were to do an indictment on everybody that misled Congress in a hearing, we'd have to build a couple new federal penitentiaries.
Let me explain to you why I don't have much faith in Tom Tillis following through on his promise to then block all Fed nominees until Donald Trump gets his act together. Because that same guy, Kevin Cramer there, that was speaking about how he doesn't think Jerome Powell is guilty of anything. As a matter of fact, if we think everybody who we're going to insinuate has lied to us is going to go to prison, we need to build more federal penitentiaries. Apparently, Kevin Cramer came out pretty strong against this action towards Jerome Powell. Maybe you can explain to me why last night or yesterday he went on Fox Business and he had a completely different energy.
Maybe pulling back, but maybe the point should be, if you're the attorney for Jay Powell and you want to avoid an indictment, how about you go to Gene Pirro and say, I'll make a deal. I'll step down today if you'll drop the investigation today. To me, that would be a win-win for everybody.
Well, I'd love that. I mean, we've all talked about getting him out of there.
Maybe.
Larry Kudlow, former staffer or advisor in Donald Trump's first term, loves the idea that Senator Cramer just came up with, which is bow down to the dictator who's utilizing the system and is sending the Justice Department at you to change your positioning on something, to change the way that you work, or even to run you out of the job early. So his deal that he says his attorney should make is go to Janine Pirro, say, we didn't do anything, but since you're utilizing the Department of Justice to come after us, well, here's the deal. I'll just leave now. That sounds like you're feeding into the fascism. That sounds like you're a fascist too, Senator Cramer. Why would you believe in someone then bowing down to this corrupt system so that they can be run out of their positions from doing the job correctly because this guy suddenly threatens them? It sounds like you'd be emboldening that criminal to then continue to do this criminal activity. He'll think it works. I'm going to keep on using the Department of Justice to go after people, despite the fact that Letitia James and James Comey both avoided this guy's horrible approach to utilizing the Justice Department to attack them. But Cramer thinks that'll be great. That is right after he said he doesn't think Jerome Powell is guilty. This guy is a fucking coward. That's who we're being run by. But let me show you how blatant this gets. Donald Trump was asked about all this stuff, this investigation into Jerome Powell on the tarmac. He doesn't need to hide it anymore because people like Kevin Cramer are all on board with it. As long as the threats keep coming, he's willing to bow down.
Sir, Jamie Dimon said today that it's not a great idea to be chipping away at the Fed's independence. Do you think Jamie Dimon's wrong about that?
Yeah, I think it's fine what I'm doing. We have a bad Fed person. He was extended by Biden. And yeah, I think he's wrong. I think it's wrong.
Sir, Jamie Dimon.
Pay close attention to what Donald Trump just said. He was asked Are you against what Jamie Dimon said? It said it's not good to chip away at the independence of the Fed. There's two things he went through in that little 15 seconds. Are you okay with chipping away at the independence of the Fed? And he says, yeah, I sure am. I'm okay with it. I remember yesterday, I was just talking about how his spokesperson, Caroline Levitt, fought with multiple people and a couple different networks about Donald Trump's stance on the independence of the Fed. Remember, he just said he's disagreeing with Jamie Dimon and he doesn't like this independence of the Fed.
No question on the independence of the Fed. There are some concerned at this moment based on the new actions by the Feds to open a probe into the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell. Can you assure independence of the Federal Reserve, and where will this be going next?
I do know one thing is for sure. Jerome Powell has proven he's not very good at his job.
Go ahead. That the Fed should operate independently from him.
The president has made it quite clear he thinks Jerome Powell is bad at his job, and the president has made it quite clear, as have many economists, by the way, that interest rates should be lowered, and they should have been lowered a long time ago.
But does he believe in the independence of the Fed?
He has, and he said that many times.
Has he? Because someone just asked him if he believes in the independence of the Fed. If he disagrees with Jamie Dimon, who says this whole independence of the Fed is getting fractured, and suddenly, maybe we shouldn't do this. And he said, no, I disagree. In other words, he doesn't believe in the independence of the Fed. I mean, we already kind of knew that. But by the way, since we're talking about, independence of the Fed, how about we talk about the independence of, like the Justice Department? Maybe Jeanine Pirro out in DC and how she's now prosecuting this case. She went on Sean Hannity's show to try and make her case because now this is blowing up in their faces.
And he's using this language about the independence of the Federal Reserve as some kind of ability for them to ignore any kind of legal oversight or legal scrutiny, or that would require us not to investigate potential lying before Congress. That's not how we work. No one is above the law. And so what we've got now is a case that, the chairman is he's objecting to, and I can't tell if the claims are out of control or whether they're true. I do an investigation, and I do it quietly until I get to the point where I can say something. But the chairman says, no, you're attacking the independence of the Federal Reserve. That's not what we're doing. We're doing our job.
And if your job is to follow everything Donald Trump tells you to do, there will be no independence of the Fed. There will be investigations into political enemies. We've seen him do it countless times. So your job is now to follow Donald Trump. So you can keep talking about the questioning of the independence of the Fed and all of that. But when what you're doing shows us the complete opposite. There was something else that Donald Trump was also talking about in that little tarmac interview. He said, it's fine with what I'm doing. With what I'm doing? I thought they said that, this is going to someone else. Donald Trump said, I don't know anything about it when he was denying this involvement in the DOJ's federal subpoenas into Fed Chair Jerome Powell. This headline and the article that followed said, I don't know anything about it. Donald Trump said that. It's here. Maybe we need a refresher. Just in case. Here, I want to remind you guys what he said on that tarmac. When that is before or after, I guess it doesn't matter to him. He says, I didn't know anything about it. Listen to the question and the answer.
Sir, Jamie Dimon said today that it's not a great idea to be chipping away at the Fed's independence. Do you think Jamie Dimon's wrong about that?
Yeah, I think it's fine what I'm doing. We have a bad Fed person. He was extended by Biden. And yeah, I think he's wrong.
It's fine what I'm doing. I thought Jeanine Pirro was running this investigation. I thought you didn't know anything about it, but now it's what he's doing. It's almost like he's even bad at lying, and everyone can kind of tell exactly how this works. The lies just they just roll off of their mouths like like normalcy. Here's the very last thing. since we're talking about, this difference between the independence of the Fed and also whether or not Donald Trump was coordinating and dictated this investigation. 1 minute they're saying that he has nothing to do with it, and the next they're saying that he is. Maybe Caroline Leavitt should be asked today in her press conference why she lied yesterday.
Well, look, as for the criminal probe, you'll have to ask the Department of Justice about that. They are in charge. As to whether he's a criminal, that's an answer the Department of Justice is going to have to find. And whether or not they do, I'd defer that to them.
Why would you defer to the Department of Justice? Donald Trump said he's doing this. Liars. All of them. I lied. I only went over by like 5 minutes. In other words, we're done. Appreciate you guys hanging out for the hour. I also have to go take off. Lots of editing to do today, you guys. I have to run through those stories like crazy, but I just want to remind you guys, anytime you encounter a liar or understand that these guys that are in the White House are lying consistently, don't believe the next thing that they're saying. And number two, don't argue with people who refuse to believe the truth, understand what we're seeing in front of our faces, because all they're doing is wasting your time and your energy. Also, ICE agents are cowards, and the resistance is eventually going to come. We'll see. It's what they're begging for. Just want to give those points again. Appreciate you guys. Happy Wednesday. It's the middle of the week. We're going to start heading down the back end of the week starting tomorrow. We'll see you guys then. Tell John I say, hey, you guys have fun over there. We'll see you later. All right. See you, Mom.